I live in a city that never seems to sleep, in a small but cozy apartment that has been my sanctuary for the past 5 years. As a marketing manager for a rapidly growing tech firm, my life is a whirlwind of deadlines, creative campaigns, and the constant pressure to innovate. The hustle is real, but I've always thrived on it, finding a strange comfort in the organized chaos of my career. But I never imagined that a skill I learned for love, not for work, would become the catalyst for the most dramatic upheaval of my professional life, exposing a snake in our corporate garden. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. The air in the office was electric, thick with a mixture of ambition and anxiety. For weeks, our entire department had been consumed by a single objective: landing the Chen account. Chen Technologies was a giant, a titan in the software industry, and securing a partnership with them would be a game-changer for our company, catapulting us into a new league. The potential deal was worth millions, but more than the money, it was about the prestige. We were all running on fumes and caffeine, our days a blur of strategy sessions, market analysis, and endless revisions to the pitch deck. I had personally poured over 100 hours into the campaign proposal, ensuring every detail was perfect, every projection was sound, and every slide was a testament to our firm's capability. My boss, Jessica Riley, the vice president of marketing, was a formidable woman who commanded respect with a glance. She was sharp, demanding, and had an almost supernatural ability to spot a weakness in an argument from a mile away. Her expectations were sky-high, which pushed everyone to deliver their absolute best. "Morgan, this is your baby," she had told me a week ago, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that left no room for error. "The creative direction, the market entry strategy, it's all your design. Don't let me down." The weight of that responsibility was immense, but I was confident in my work. My team and I had built a campaign that was not just innovative but also deeply aligned with Chen Technologies' brand ethos. It was, in my humble opinion, a masterpiece. However, I wasn't the only one with a major stake in this deal. Ben Carter, the senior sales manager, was my counterpart on the sales side. Ben was everything I wasn't: slick, overtly charming, and ruthlessly competitive. He had a way of making everything a contest, and he saw me as his primary rival. While I focused on the substance and creativity of our work, Ben was all about the optics and the schmoozing. He was a master of corporate politics, always ready with a well-timed compliment for an executive or a casual, backhanded remark to undermine a colleague. We had a history of clashing, our professional styles as different as night and day. He saw my meticulous, data-driven approach as slow and my creative instincts as frivolous. I, in turn, found his aggressive, glad-handing tactics to be shallow and often detrimental to building genuine client relationships. For the Chen pitch, we were forced to collaborate, a situation that was tense from the start. Ben was in charge of presenting the financial projections and closing the deal, while I was responsible for presenting the marketing strategy. "Just make sure your arts and crafts show doesn't bore them to death, Morgan," he'd said with a smirk during one of our preparation meetings. "When you're done with the pretty pictures, I'll step in and talk about what really matters, the numbers." I bit my tongue, refusing to let him get under my skin. My pretty pictures were the heart of the proposal, the very thing that would make Mr. Chen see the value in our partnership. The numbers were just the consequence of a brilliant strategy. The day of the pitch arrived, and the atmosphere was even more charged. Mr. David Chen himself, the legendary CEO, was flying in to hear our proposal in person. It was an honor and an immense pressure. We were all gathered in the main boardroom, the one with the panoramic city views, which was reserved for the most important meetings. Jessica was pacing near the window, her expression a mask of calm professionalism that I knew hid a churning stomach. The rest of my team was double-checking the presentation, their faces pale with nervous energy. Ben, of course, was the picture of confidence. He swaggered into the room, his tie perfectly knotted, and flashed a brilliant white smile at everyone. "Showtime, people," he announced, clapping his hands together. Let's go make some money. He shot a pointed look in my direction. Try not to trip over the equipment, Morgan. We need this to be smooth. I ignored him, taking a deep, calming breath and focusing on my notes. I knew my material inside and out. I was ready. The receptionist's call came through to Jessica's phone. He's on his way up. A final wave of nervous shuffling swept through the room. We all took our places around the massive oak table. I was seated to Jessica's right, Ben to her left. The plan was simple. Jessica would open with the introductions, I would present the core marketing and creative strategy for the first half of the meeting, and Ben would take over to discuss the sales funnel, the financial benefits, and the terms of the partnership. When Mr. Chen entered the room, he was not what I expected. He was an older gentleman, perhaps in his early 60s, with a kind face and gentle eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He carried an air of quiet authority, his presence calming rather than intimidating. He was accompanied by two of his top executives, who looked far more severe. Jessica greeted them warmly, her voice smooth and professional. Mr. Chen, it's an honor to welcome you to our headquarters. I'm Jessica Riley, the VP of Marketing. She then introduced the key members of our team. As the introductions were made, I noticed something subtle. Mr. Chen wasn't just listening, he was watching our lips, his focus intense. He nodded in acknowledgement to each person, but he didn't speak. One of his associates leaned in and spoke quietly to Jessica. I couldn't hear what was said, but Jessica's posture shifted almost imperceptibly. The meeting began. Jessica delivered a powerful opening, setting the stage for the partnership. Then, she turned the floor over to me. And now, I'll hand it over to Morgan, our marketing manager, who has been the architect of the innovative strategy we're about to present. I stood up, my heart pounding a steady rhythm against my ribs. I smiled towards Mr. Chen and began my presentation. I spoke clearly and passionately about our vision, about the story we wanted to tell for his brand, and the connection we wanted to forge with his customers. As I spoke, I watched Mr. Chen. His eyes never left my face. He was fully engaged, but in a way that felt different from any other executive I had ever pitched to. The pieces started to click into place in my mind, but before I could fully process the thought, the first part of my presentation was over. I had built the foundation, and now it was time to move into the interactive portion, a Q&A before diving into the campaign specifics. And that was the moment everything was about to change. As I paused, ready to invite questions, I noticed Ben shifting impatiently in his seat. He had been practically vibrating with the need to take over, seeing my part of the presentation as a mere opening act for his main event. He cleared his throat loudly, a clear signal that he thought I was taking too long. Jessica shot him a warning glance, but Ben was already leaning forward, a condescending smile plastered on his face. Fantastic, Morgan, he began, his voice dripping with false enthusiasm. A truly poetic start. But I'm sure Mr. Chen is eager to get to the brass tacks, the actual ROI. He turned his attention to Mr. Chen, his voice booming with the practiced confidence of a salesman. Mr. Chen, what Morgan has laid out is the philosophical why. What I want to show you is the profitable how. Before Mr. Chen could react, one of his associates, a stern-looking woman, spoke up. Her voice was crisp and formal. Mr. Chen prefers to absorb the full presentation before engaging in a detailed Q&A. Please continue, Ms. Morgan. Ben's smile tightened at the edges. Being sidelined, even for a moment, was a blow to his ego. He leaned back in his chair with a theatrical sigh, making it clear to everyone on our side of the table that he found this delay tedious. It was then that I confirmed my suspicion. The way Mr. Chen focused on our lips, the way his associate acted as an intermediary, it all pointed to one thing. Mr. Chen was deaf or hard of hearing. He was an expert lip reader, but in a fast-paced meeting, nuances could be lost. This realization sent a jolt through me. It wasn't just a professional curiosity, it was deeply personal. My younger sister, Chloe, was born deaf. Growing up, sign language was our second language. We learned it as a family so Chloe would never feel isolated. It was a language of love, of connection, of late-night conversations and silly jokes. I was fluent in American Sign Language, ASL, a skill that was as much a part of me as my native English. It was a part of my life I never mentioned at work. It was personal, a piece of my heart that belonged to my family. As I prepared to resume my presentation, I saw Ben lean over to Mark, a junior sales rep seated next to him. Ben shielded his mouth with his hand, but from my angle, I could see his profile and read his lips perfectly. He whispered, "Guess the old man can't hear. No wonder he's just staring. Probably doesn't understand a word of Morgan's fluff anyway." Mark stifled a snicker, quickly schooling his features back into a professional mask when he saw me looking. Rage, hot and swift, surged through me. It wasn't just the unprofessionalism or the blatant disrespect for a potential client. It was the casual cruelty, the dismissive attitude towards something that was so integral to my sister's world. To Ben, a disability was a joke, a weakness to be mocked. In that instant, my nervousness about the presentation vanished, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. This meeting was no longer just about landing an account. It was about respect. I took a steadying breath, my mind racing. I had a choice. I could ignore Ben's disgusting comment, carry on with the presentation as planned, and hope for the best. Or I could do something else. I could bridge the gap that Ben was so carelessly mocking. I could use the language of my heart to make a real connection. I made my decision. I turned my full attention back to Mr. Chen. I smiled, a genuine, warm smile this time. I resumed speaking, but as I did, I let my hands do the talking as well. I began to sign, my movements fluid and natural, mirroring my spoken words. I wasn't just presenting a marketing strategy anymore, I was having a conversation. Our vision, I said, and my hands painted the concept of sight and future, is to build a community around your brand. My fingers danced, spelling out the key words, emphasizing the concepts of connection and belonging. We believe in authentic storytelling, in creating a narrative that resonates on a personal level. The change in the room was instantaneous. Mr. Chen, who had been watching me with polite interest, suddenly sat bolt upright. His eyes widened, first in surprise, then in understanding. A slow, brilliant smile spread across his face. He leaned forward, his entire being now focused on me with an intensity that made the rest of the room fade away. He completely ignored the large screen displaying my slides, his attention captivated by the conversation I was having with him, in his language. On our side of the table, there was stunned silence. My team members stared, their mouths slightly agape. Jessica's eyes were wide with a mixture of shock and dawning realization. She looked from me to Mr. Chen, and a flicker of understanding, and perhaps even pride, crossed her face. And then there was Ben. His smug expression had dissolved into one of utter disbelief. His jaw was slack, his face a comical mask of confusion. He stared at my moving hands as if I had suddenly sprouted a second head. He glanced at Jessica, then at his junior colleagues, searching for an explanation, but found only their own astonishment. The whispers had stopped. The mockery had been silenced, replaced by the eloquent beauty of a language he could not comprehend. I had completely seized control of the room, not with a louder voice or more aggressive tactics, but with a quiet act of inclusion. The power dynamic had shifted in a way Ben Carter could never have anticipated, and his face, for the first time since I'd known him, was flushed with something that looked a lot like fear. The rest of my presentation was unlike any I had ever given. It became a seamless blend of spoken English for the benefit of everyone in the room and ASL for the direct engagement of Mr. Chen. It wasn't distracting or disjointed, it felt more complete, more layered. My hands and voice worked in harmony, and the strategy one was presenting took on a new depth. I wasn't just talking about connection, I was demonstrating it. Mr. Chen was an active participant now. He would nod, his eyes alight with comprehension, and occasionally, he would sign a question back to me. They were sharp, insightful questions that cut straight to the core of the strategy. "How do you propose to handle negative feedback in this community model?" he signed, his movements precise and articulate. I responded in kind, both speaking and signing my answer. "We see negative feedback as an opportunity. We'll have a dedicated team for proactive engagement, turning detractors into advocates by showing we're listening." His associate, who had initially been the intermediary, now sat back, watching the exchange with a small, knowing smile. The other two executives from Chin Technologies were scribbling notes furiously, their earlier stern expressions replaced with looks of intense interest. They were witnessing a masterclass in communication, and they knew it. My team was mesmerized. They had seen me as a capable, creative manager, but they had never seen this side of me. This was something beyond a professional skill. It was a part of my soul that I had shared, and it had transformed the energy of the entire meeting. Ben, however, was stewing in a potent cocktail of fury and humiliation. He was completely out of his depth. The meeting had veered into a territory he couldn't navigate, and his role was rapidly diminishing. He tried to interject several times, his voice loud and jarring in the now focused atmosphere. If I could just jump in and talk about the projected market share increase. He would start, only to be met with a polite but firm hand gesture from Jessica, telling him to wait. He was becoming invisible, a ghost at the table, and he couldn't stand it. The control he so desperately craved had been stripped away from him, not by a corporate power play he could understand, but by an act of empathy he couldn't possibly replicate. When I concluded my portion of the presentation, a quiet but profound sense of accomplishment settled over me. I had done more than just present a marketing plan, I had built a bridge. Mr. Chin signed to me, a broad smile on his face. That was the most compelling and considerate presentation I have ever had the privilege of witnessing. "Thank you, Morgan." I signed back, feeling a blush creep up my neck. "The honor was all mine, Mr. Chen." Jessica then took the floor, her voice filled with a newfound warmth. "Thank you, Morgan. As you can see, Mr. Chen, our commitment to communication and connection is at the core of everything we do. Now, Ben will walk you through the financial framework that supports this vision." It was Ben's turn. He stood up, trying to recapture his earlier bravado, but it rang hollow. He launched into his slides, which were filled with charts, graphs, and bold, aggressive numbers. He spoke in his usual sales pitch cadence, but the magic in the room was gone. He was talking at Mr. Chen, not with him. Mr. Chen listened politely, his eyes on Ben's lips, but the vibrant engagement was gone. He was no longer a participant in a conversation, he was the audience for a monologue. Ben was oblivious to this shift. He was in his element, throwing around jargon and acronyms, a world away from the genuine human connection that had just been established. He was trying to sell a product, while I had been trying to build a partnership. The difference was palpable. After about 10 minutes of Ben's rapid-fire delivery, Mr. Chen raised a hand, stopping him mid-sentence. He looked directly at me and signed, "Morgan, could you please clarify his point about the tiered commission structure? I'm not sure I follow his logic." Ben froze, his mouth hanging open. He looked at me, then at Mr. Chen, then back at me. He had no idea what had been said. The CEO of their target company had just asked for clarification, and Ben, the great closer, was completely deaf to the question. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. All eyes in the room turned to me. Ben's face was a thundercloud of rage. He had been rendered irrelevant, and I was the one holding all the cards. I calmly translated for him. "Mr. Chen would like you to explain the tiered commission structure in more detail, Ben. He's not following your logic." My voice was neutral, but the implication was clear. Ben's brilliant financial plan was confusing and poorly explained. He shot me a look of pure venom before turning back to Mr. Chen, his face red with embarrassment. He tried to re-explain, but his confidence was shattered. He stumbled over his words, his slick presentation falling apart at the seams. He had been exposed, not for a lack of knowledge, but for a lack of connection. And in this room, on this day, connection was the only currency that mattered. The rest of the meeting was a painful limp to the finish line for Ben. He rushed through his remaining slides, his voice tight with anger. Every few minutes, Mr. Chin would politely interrupt, not with a spoken word, but with a signed question directed at me. Each time, I would translate, and each time, a fresh wave of humiliation would wash over Ben. I had become the bridge, the essential link in the most important meeting of his career, and he hated me for it. When the presentation finally concluded, Jessica stood to thank Mr. Chen and his team. "We appreciate you taking the time to hear our proposal. We are very excited about the potential of this partnership." Mr. Chen rose from his chair. He walked past Jessica and Ben, and came directly to me. He extended his hand, not for a handshake, but palm up, an invitation to sign. "Your company is impressive," he signed, his expression sincere. "But you, Morgan, are the reason we will be signing this deal. You did not see my deafness as a barrier, you saw it as an opportunity to connect. That is the kind of partner I want for my company." He then turned to Jessica, and for the first time, he spoke. His voice was a low, carefully practiced rumble, each word enunciated with effort. "Your marketing manager," he said, looking at me, "is your greatest asset. The contract is yours. My team will be in touch to finalize the details." With that, he and his executives departed, leaving a stunned and silent boardroom in their wake. For a moment, nobody moved. The multi-million-dollar deal, the one we had all lost sleep over for weeks, was ours. And it was mine. I had single-handedly secured it, not just with my work, but with a part of myself I had never intended to share in a corporate setting. The silence was broken by the eruption of cheers from my team. They rushed over, congratulating me, their faces beaming with genuine excitement and awe. "Morgan, that was incredible. I've never seen anything like it. You were amazing." Jessica came over and placed a hand on my shoulder. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were shining with pride. "Morgan," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I am speechless. What you did in there was extraordinary. Thank you." It was a moment of pure triumph. But as I looked across the room, I saw Ben. He was standing alone by the window, his back to the celebration. His shoulders were slumped, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He hadn't said a word. The congratulations, the excitement, none of it was for him. He had been a spectator at his own show. Later that afternoon, after the adrenaline had faded and a sense of calm had settled back over the office, I was catching up on emails when Ben appeared at the door of my office. He didn't knock, just leaned against the frame, his arms crossed. His earlier rage had been replaced by a cold, menacing calm. "You think you're clever, don't you?" he said, his voice low. I looked up from my screen. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ben." "Oh, I think you do," he sneered, stepping into my office and closing the door behind him. "That whole sign language thing. Very dramatic. Very calculated. You planned that, didn't you? You knew he was deaf." I stared at him, incredulous. "Planned it? Ben, I had no idea. I saw him lip-reading and I just reacted. It was about making him feel included." He let out a short, sharp laugh that held no humor. "Included? Don't give me that saintly act. You saw an opportunity to upstage me, to make me look like an idiot, and you took it. You deliberately sabotaged my part of the presentation." "Sabotaged you?" I shot back, my own anger beginning to rise. "By translating a client's questions? You made yourself look like an idiot by being a condescending jerk who mocks people behind their backs. I saw what you whispered to Mark. It was disgusting." His face darkened. "You have no idea what you're talking about. I read your lips, Ben. Just like Mr. Chen reads lips. You called him an old man who couldn't hear. You have no idea how offensive that is. My sister is deaf. That's why I know ASL. It's not some party trick I pull out to impress CEOs. The mention of my sister didn't faze him. If anything, it seemed to fuel his anger. I don't care about your sister, he spat. I care about the fact that you made me look incompetent in front of the biggest client of my career. You embarrassed me. You embarrassed yourself, Ben, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. All I did was show a potential partner some basic human decency. Something you clearly know nothing about. He took a step closer, his eyes narrowed into slits. You may have won this battle, Morgan. You got the glory. But don't get comfortable. You made an enemy today. And I promise you, you will regret it. He turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. The threat hung in the air, heavy and chilling. I had won the deal, but I had also started a war. And I had a sinking feeling that Ben Carter was a man who fought dirty. In the weeks that followed, the office was a strange landscape of celebration and tension. The Chen Technologies partnership was the talk of the company. Jessica was ecstatic, the executive board was thrilled, and I was officially the company's new golden girl. I was given a spot bonus, a public commendation in the company-wide newsletter, and a new level of respect from my colleagues. My career had been launched into a new trajectory overnight. But Ben's threat lingered in the back of my mind. He was outwardly civil, offering tight-lipped congratulations when others were around, but the look in his eyes was pure poison. He avoided me in the hallways and was curt and dismissive in meetings. I knew he was biding his time, waiting for an opportunity to act on his promise. I just didn't know when or how he would strike. The first phase of the Chin project kicked off, and I was assigned as the project lead from the marketing side, working closely with a counterpart from their company. It was exhilarating work. Mr. Chen himself would occasionally join our video calls, and we would converse in a mix of spoken word and ASL, a seamless communication that our teams quickly grew accustomed to. The partnership was flourishing, and everything seemed to be going perfectly. The bomb dropped on a Tuesday afternoon. I was summoned to a meeting in the main boardroom. The invitation was vague, titled Chin Project Review, but the attendee list was anything but. It included Jessica, the Chief Operating Officer, the head of HR, and Ben. A cold knot of dread formed in my stomach. This wasn't a standard project review. I walked into the room to find a somber atmosphere. Jessica wouldn't meet my eye. The COO looked grim. And Ben. Ben looked triumphant. He was sitting at the opposite end of the table, a thin, smug smile playing on his lips. He had the look of a predator who had finally cornered his prey. Morgan, thank you for joining us, the COO began, his voice formal and cold. We've called this meeting to discuss a very serious matter that has come to our attention regarding the Chin account. I felt my blood run cold. A serious matter? The project is ahead of schedule. The client feedback has been overwhelmingly positive. This isn't about the project's performance, the head of HR cut in. This is about how the account was secured. Ben has brought forward a complaint, along with some troubling evidence. She slid a file across the table towards me. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside were printed copies of emails and instant messenger logs. They were conversations between me and a woman named Laura Wells, who worked in the executive administration department at Chin Technologies. The messages were dated from the weeks before the pitch meeting. Reading them, my heart sank. They were completely innocent. Laura and I had a mutual friend from college, and we had connected on a professional networking site months ago, long before the Chin partnership was even on the radar. When I realized her company was the one we were pitching to, I had reached out. The messages were innocuous. We talked about our mutual friend, our jobs, the challenges of working in the tech industry. I had mentioned I was working on a big pitch for her company, but I never asked for inside information. I simply asked what her company culture was like, what they valued. But Ben had twisted it. He had taken these friendly, professional exchanges and framed them as something sinister. "As you can see," Ben said, his voice smooth and filled with feigned regret, "Morgan was communicating with a Chin employee for weeks before the pitch. She was gathering intel, engaging in unethical corporate espionage. And worst of all," he paused for dramatic effect, "she discovered that Mr. Chen was deaf and concealed this information from the team. She withheld critical client information so she could stage her little performance in the boardroom and steal the spotlight." The accusation was so outrageous, so maliciously false, that I was momentarily stunned into silence. "That's a lie," I finally managed, my voice shaking with anger. "I did not know Mr. Chen was deaf. Our conversations were completely innocent. I was doing my due diligence, trying to understand the company's values so I could create a better pitch." The COO looked at me, his expression unreadable. "The emails show you asking about their communication style and their leadership's priorities. And you never disclosed this contact to your superior, Ms. Riley." Jessica finally looked at me, her face a mixture of disappointment and confusion. "Morgan, is this true? Did you know about Mr. Chen and not tell us?" "No. I swear I didn't," I pleaded, turning to her. "I deduced it during the meeting. I would never withhold information like that. Ben is twisting this because he was humiliated that I secured the deal and he didn't." Ben scoffed. "Oh, of course. I'm the villain. The fact is, you cheated, Morgan. You used inside information to manipulate the situation for your own personal glory. You put the entire company at risk with your unethical behavior. What if Chin Technologies finds out we were spying on them? This partnership, this multi-million-dollar deal, could collapse because of your recklessness." He had crafted the perfect narrative. He painted me as a manipulative schemer and himself as the righteous whistleblower, concerned only for the company's welfare. He had taken my greatest triumph and reframed it as my most profound ethical failure. The executives, who only saw the printed evidence in Ben's compelling performance, were buying it. The room felt like it was closing in on me. I was being tried and convicted, and the truth didn't seem to matter. My career, my reputation, it was all turning to dust. "This is a very serious breach of conduct, Morgan," the COO said, his tone grave. "We're placing you on immediate administrative leave pending a full investigation." The words hit me like a physical blow. Administrative leave. It was a corporate death sentence. Everyone knew it was just a formality before being fired. I looked at Jessica, hoping for some sign of support, but she just looked away, her face etched with disappointment. She believed him. They all believed him. Ben's smug smile widened. He had won. He had gotten his revenge, and it was more complete than he could have ever imagined. Not only had he discredited me, but he had also positioned himself as the hero who saved the company from my supposed treachery. I was escorted back to my desk by an HR representative to gather my personal belongings. My team watched in stunned silence, their faces a mixture of confusion and pity. I couldn't even look at them. The humiliation was overwhelming. As I packed my small box of things, my mind was racing. This couldn't be happening. I was innocent, but it was my word against Ben's carefully constructed web of lies. How could I possibly prove it? That evening, I sat in my apartment, the box of my professional life on the floor, and felt a wave of despair wash over me. I had worked so hard, and it had all been destroyed by one man's petty jealousy. I thought about giving up, about just letting them fire me and trying to start over somewhere else, but the injustice of it all burned in my gut. I couldn't let him win. Then, an idea sparked in the darkness. Mr. Chen. He was the key. He knew the truth. He knew I hadn't been aware of his deafness beforehand. He had seen my genuine surprise, my spontaneous reaction. But how could I reach him? Going through official channels was impossible now that I was on leave. I remembered my email exchanges with Laura Wells, the contact from Chin Technologies. We had exchanged personal email addresses at one point. It was a long shot, a massive breach of protocol, but it was the only shot I had. With trembling fingers, I drafted an email to her. I explained the situation briefly and professionally, careful not to sound like a disgruntled employee. I didn't blame Ben or my company. I simply stated that there had been a misunderstanding about how our initial connection was made and that my professional integrity had been called into question. I ended with a simple, desperate plea: if there is any way you could discreetly pass a message to Mr. Chen for me, I would be eternally grateful. It is of the utmost importance. I hit send, my heart pounding. All I could do now was wait. For 2 agonizing days, I heard nothing. I replayed the boardroom meeting in my head 1,000 times. Ben's triumphant face burned into my memory. The company had gone silent. I was in limbo, a pariah. I had started to lose hope. Then, on Thursday afternoon, an email landed in my inbox. The sender was David Chen. My breath caught in my throat. I opened it. The message was short and to the point. Morgan, Laura forwarded me your message. I am very disturbed by what you've told me. A great injustice is being done. Please be available for a video conference tomorrow at 10 a.m. I have sent an invitation to your COO as well. I will handle this. Be strong. A tidal wave of relief washed over me, so powerful it brought tears to my eyes. He believed me. He was going to help. The next morning, I sat at my laptop, dressed in a business suit, ready for the most important call of my life. A few minutes before 10, the video conference link became active. I clicked on it, and my screen was filled with the faces of my COO and the head of HR. They looked surprised and deeply uncomfortable to see me there. A moment later, another face appeared, Jessica. She looked stressed and tired. And then, another, Ben. His smugness had been replaced by a look of utter shock. He clearly had not been expecting me to be on this call. Finally, Mr. Chen's face appeared. He was not smiling. He looked powerful and furious. One of his associates was with him to act as a voice interpreter for the group. Good morning, Mr. Chen's interpreter began, her voice sharp and clear. Mr. Chen has called this meeting because it has come to his attention that Morgan, the woman who was instrumental in forging the partnership between our companies, has been suspended based on false accusations. My COO stammered, Mr. Chen, this is an internal HR matter. I'm not sure it's appropriate. It became my matter, the interpreter cut in, relaying Mr. Chen's signed words with force, when my name and my disability were used as weapons in a petty corporate vendetta. Let me be perfectly clear. At no point before our meeting did I have any contact with Morgan. She had no knowledge of my hearing impairment. I witnessed her realization in real time during her presentation. Her decision to use sign language was a spontaneous act of kindness and brilliant communication, not a pre-planned stunt. He turned his steely gaze on Ben, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. Furthermore, the interpreter continued, I was made aware of the derogatory comments made by Mr. Carter during that meeting. Mocking a disability is not something I tolerate in a business partner. It speaks to a profound lack of character and integrity. The blood drained from Ben's face. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. This is an outrage, my COO said, finally finding his voice. Ben, is this true? But Mr. Chen wasn't finished. The accusations against Morgan are baseless. They are the actions of a jealous and dishonorable man who tried to sabotage a colleague for his own gain. My partnership is with a company I believe to have integrity. I am now questioning my judgment. You have 2 options. You can reinstate Morgan immediately with a full apology and deal with Mr. Carter's despicable behavior appropriately. Or, you can consider our multi-million-dollar contract terminated, effective immediately. The ultimatum hung in the air, a stunning, brutal checkmate. There was no negotiation, no room for debate. Ben had tried to use the Chin deal as his shield, and now the man himself had turned it into a sword pointed directly at his heart. The COO looked at Ben, his face a mask of cold fury. "Ben, you are a disgrace. You are fired. Security will escort you from the building immediately. Your access is revoked." Ben just stared, his face ashen. He had lost everything. He had flown too close to the sun on wings of lies and deceit, and they had melted, sending him crashing back to Earth. Without another word, his video feed blinked out. Mr. Chin then looked at me, and his severe expression softened. He signed, and the interpreter's voice followed. "Morgan, I apologize for what you have been through. You are a remarkable talent. I hope you will continue to lead the project from your side." And just like that, the war was over. I had won. The aftermath of that video call was swift and decisive. I received a personal call from the COO with a profuse apology. My administrative leave was expunged from my record as if it had never happened. I was reinstated, my reputation not just restored but enhanced. The story of what had happened, and Mr. Chen's dramatic intervention, spread through the company like wildfire. I was no longer just the golden girl, I was a symbol of integrity, a giant slayer. Walking back into the office was a surreal experience. The colleagues who had looked at me with pity now looked at me with awe. My team welcomed me back with a standing ovation. Jessica pulled me into her office and gave me a heartfelt apology, admitting she had been wrong to doubt me. Our professional relationship, once strained by her disappointment, was now stronger than ever, forged in the fire of betrayal and vindication. Life settled into a new, better normal. Ben was gone, a ghost in the corporate machine, and the toxic cloud of his ambition lifted with him. The office culture felt lighter, more collaborative. The Chin project continued to be a massive success, and my role in it grew. I was no longer just a marketing manager, I was a key strategic partner, a trusted voice in the company's future. About 6 months later, Jessica called me into her office. "The board has created a new position," she said, a proud smile on her face. "Director of Inclusive Marketing and Client Relations. It's a senior role, focused on building authentic connections with our diverse global client base. They want to make what you did for the Chen account the standard for how we do business. The position is yours, if you want it." It was more than a promotion, it was a validation of everything I believed in. It was a chance to build a legacy based on empathy and understanding. Of course, I accepted. My journey had been a tumultuous one. I had been celebrated, then betrayed, then cast out, and finally, vindicated. Ben Carter, in his attempt to destroy my career, had inadvertently launched it into the stratosphere. He had tried to use my humanity as a weapon against me, but in the end, it was my greatest strength. My fluency in ASL, a language I had learned out of love for my sister, had become the cornerstone of my professional success. It served as a constant reminder that the things that make us unique, the personal skills and passions we cultivate outside of the office, are often our most powerful assets. The most profound connections are not made through spreadsheets and projections, but through the simple, powerful act of seeing another person and meeting them where they are. In a world of corporate noise and competitive whispers, sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is offer a silent, understanding hand.